Welcome to the We Watch This Movie podcast, where we sit down and dissect the latest and greatest in movies. I'm Dan, aka Dan L Movies, joined by the man with 2,000 films on his watch list, and it gets bigger every day. Jackson, how are you today?
Fantastic, Dan. Never been better.
Beautiful. And of course, we thank all the people tuning into our first episode today, and we appreciate any 5-star ratings or any ratings for that matter on any platform you're listening to us on. And of course, we thank our sponsor for today's video, Displate. We'll talk about them a little bit later. Before we get into the movie today, The Way Back with Ben Affleck, Jackson, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Dan, you can find me on social media at MarshallOnFilm with an underscore at the very end. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and most of all, Letterboxd. I review and love movies from star-studded affairs to D-grade schlock. There's not much more there you could say. And you did mention, going on about 2,000 films in the watch list, and there's no hope that it's going to shrink.
I used to be the same, but then I started condensing it because I knew it wasn't realistic. But you haven't hit that point yet. And I'm Dan Allen Movies on Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, like Jackson, reviewing movies and having a lot of fun with it. Jackson, are you ready for our discussion today? Ben Affleck's new flick, he stars in it, The Way Back.
Keep pressing, trapping, taking charges. You guys earned this tonight.
Let's set the scene. Back in high school, Jack Cunningham, played by Ben Affleck, had everything going for him. A basketball superstar, he could have punched his ticket to college or even the pros, but instead, he chose to walk away from the game, forfeiting his future. Jack's glory days are long gone, but as it turns out, not forgotten. Years later, he gets the chance to take back his life when he is asked to coach the struggling basketball team at his high school. Jack reluctantly accepts, surprising no one more than himself, and as the boys start to come together as a team and win, he may get his last shot at redemption. Dan, we just saw this film at the cinemas. What were your thoughts?
Jackson, first thoughts on The Way Back. Ben Affleck. I really enjoyed myself. We obviously talked a little bit off air that the pacing wasn't quite all the way there throughout the film. But for an overall enjoyment level, I had a good time. I thought it was a sort of a real deep dive into this character that Ben Affleck was playing, but was it really a character? Because we know that Ben Affleck has had similar struggles in his personal life with alcohol and a divorce. So they were hitting on real themes, and I thought that really added that he had experienced that. I think that added to the film. But not everyone will know that going in, so it's interesting to see how people will take the film. But as an overall film, I thought it came together quite nicely. What were your thoughts?
You bring up an interesting point there when you mention this movie as a reflection of its leading man, Ben Affleck. And now you've got me considering, how much does this film stand on its own merits when you don't know the behind the scenes and the production history about it? And I don't believe it really holds up all that much. It was okay, and I felt the film was at its best during those basketball sequences. That was probably the most engaging. In fact, it was the most engaging thing for me. But outside of that, it wasn't that great. Even those basketball scenes are things that we've seen done better in other films, like Coach Carter from how many years, 20 years ago now, and other sports movies, even from the director, Gavin O'Connor. He's tackled some of this similar material before. Ben Affleck, he is great in this movie, but I just don't believe the rest of it is, it doesn't quite hold up. It doesn't quite come to scratch. Knowing that he did have a lot of issues going in, and certainly while production was on, I don't know.
So what you're saying is
it's okay.
It didn't come together. It wouldn't have come together unless you knew about Ben Affleck's past and that sort of thing, or
thematically, a lot of things really resonated with me. Particularly Ben Affleck's character is Jack. he's got his own issues with fatherhood, and we're not going to go too much into it here with spoilers. He's clearly got some traumatic experiences he's had with his own father, and we see that mirrored in some of the students that he coaches. I would have loved to seen more exploration of that and less heavy-handedness that we got with Ben Affleck character's backstory.
There is a lot of shots of him drinking and cans of alcohol, or him at the bar. Like, I reckon that is a good 20 minutes of the film.
I'm not sure if it's a good advertisement for Coors Light or a bad advertisement, but who knows?
Yeah, no, it's definitely not a good investment. I understand what you're saying. It isn't the greatest sporting or underdog story we've ever seen. It didn't follow a lot of the tropes that are in those films. I didn't think it did. I thought it went off in its own direction, focused more on the character of him rather than the team building, I thought.
Yes.
Whereas, Coach Carter and all that sort of focuses more on the sporting side of it. This was not about the sport at all to me when I watched it.
You're certainly right. I think I would have preferred Coach Cunningham, to be honest. That's what I would have liked to have seen. That's when I felt the movie was at its best. I felt like it really did peak towards the end of that second act, when the team were winning. They were picking up wins before we had that final fall before going into the third act and our resolution. I felt like that was stronger than some of the inner demons and the battles that were going on with Ben Affleck's character. I mean, I understand it's a personal story, and it certainly is arguably Ben Affleck's movie, but it didn't quite resonate with me. It wasn't that gripping. It wasn't that engaging. I don't know if that's at fault of the screenplay, if it's the direction, if it comes down to Ben himself.
I feel like if you looked at this screenplay, you wouldn't see anything that special.
No.
And I'm not taking anything away from whoever wrote this. It's extremely hard to write a screenplay for a film. But if you looked at that on paper, it wasn't anything amazing or special. But as the film came together, I thought they did pretty well with what they were given. I understand what you're saying, but I just thought it came together. I think you were looking more for the sporting element, and I understand that did peak at that point where the team got into the finals. But as I said, it wasn't about that. The film always was about him overcoming that obstacle, and that was a side show to me. Yeah, it did have some pacing issues.
I agree that that's not what the movie was about, and that's fine. What was more interesting to me was the story of this coach realizing what he wanted to regain, his sense of purpose, his sense of usefulness, that would be applied in the team. And yes, he has his own demons to overcome, but that they were clearly going to support him through it. Why not stick to that? That, for me, that was more engaging. That was more interesting. We didn't need to find out so much about his backstory and some things that came across a little bit like we're getting beaten over the head with. We want to feel sad for this guy and depressed for this guy, and he's had everything go wrong for him. Well, why couldn't this story be about a guy who's simply made some bad decisions along the way? As we find out, and I'm sure we'll go into a little bit later, there are some plot revelations that explain why he hasn't got a great relationship with his wife, and why he isn't held in a high regard by his family. Why not just play into that? I believe some things are better left unsaid, and I think that could have made for a stronger story and could have let some other themes blossom. I loved him mentoring the students. And for me, maybe there was stuff left on the cutting room floor. I don't think it was ever filmed. I don't think it was in the screenplay. It was okay. I love Ben. Not quite the movie for me.
So the third act really let you down overall?
Yeah, it did. The third act really, really let me down. You agreed when we were talking off air that coming towards the end of the second act, the team were winning. They were looking really good before we had this final fall, but it just felt a bit flat.
It did fall flat in that third act, but it didn't take away from the whole package for me. I still enjoyed it as a whole package, but I agree, it did fall flat. And that final shot, we'll go into spoilers in a second, but those final few shots did leave, I'm like, are they ending on this? Really? And then
it was an odd note.
It was an odd note.
It was a bit of a sour note to end on, really. We wanted we were wrapped up in his story and in Jack Cunningham's arc. Couldn't we have gotten that sweet revelation? You know, this isn't a tentpole movie for a cinematic franchise. We're not expecting to see The Way Back 3, 4, and 5. You know, how many times can this guy come back? But
yeah. Spoiler alert. All right, let's head into spoiler territory because there's a lot to uncover and dissect. Maybe we start straight with that ending. That slow pan, I did not think that end on that. I really thought there was 15, 20 minutes left in it to tell the finishing touches of that story. But I guess that wasn't the director's vision.
No, I agree. I felt like there was something more to come. And yes, this certainly was a personal win and a deep win for Jack Cunningham and arguably for Ben Affleck, someone who clearly over the last few years has struggled with his own personal demons and struggled with some hits and some not so big hits. But the movie wasn't this. It's not this big comeback. It's not The Way Back for Ben Affleck.
Really?
And I feel like the ending kind of mirrors that sour note that our protagonist has more to give and Ben Affleck's got more to give.
In terms of the whole film and ending, or what do you mean?
Yeah, I wanted more. I wanted more from the end. Is it such a bad thing to want more from a film? No, it's not. But
is that a sign of a good film that you wanted more?
True. Is it a sign of a good film that we wanted to stay in that world? Yes, I believe it is.
But that doesn't take away from the fact that it fell flat for you. Yeah.
Would I be willing to go back to it? I don't think so.
No. What did you think of the other characters within the world and you know his wife, the sort of side story with the other couple, and how their kid was going through a similar thing? Did that need to be in the film?
I hate to be so harsh, but there wasn't much of a story going on. The supporting cast were fairly serviceable, but we didn't explore what was going on. The maths teacher who was almost a B story going on. I thought he gave a fine performance. I think his name's Al Madrigal. He's going to be in Morbius coming up later this year. He's a comedian to watch. He looks like to be doing some interesting stuff. But
so he's a comedic actor generally, yeah.
Well, a stand-up comedian, and often we see them in some of these kind of subversive, dramatic roles. But going back to what was going on with these supporting characters, well, not a whole heck of a lot. Clearly, Jack Cunningham's wife, who, I'm so sorry, what was her name? Angela? We shouldn't say Jack Cunningham's wife. It should be Angela. Angela.
Yeah.
We didn't get a whole lot of what was going on with her other than, yes, she was ready to move on from this broken down mess of a man.
And that was it, sort of, yeah.
And that was it.
They didn't explore it any further.
She was there for work. What was she doing?
I thought they were planting the seeds of them getting back together at that one point, but then it didn't sort of pan out that way.
Which is fine.
No, yeah. We've seen it done well in, like Marriage Story, how that wasn't a great ending, that wasn't a happy ending, but it was the story they wanted to tell and it worked. If you want
to talk about a movie that does explore a broken down marriage and there's clearly some unresolved trauma there over a child, then I think Marriage Story
that's how you do it well.
Yeah, and that's a great example of how you can tie a neat bow on this film that says these people aren't quite meant for each other and they've still got quite a lot of growing to do, but they can still enjoy those little moments where Jack Cunningham, he's not quite at that point yet to enjoy those little moments. And yes, he did have a small win there at the end when he made those basketball shots and he picked up the ball again. But I believe he should have been there celebrating with that basketball team.
I agree. It was his own journey in a way where, he did pick up the ball finally and make the shots, but
it didn't resonate.
With the side characters, another thing I noticed is the Angela only had like 7 lines in the whole film. Am I wrong?
I don't believe you're wrong at all. I mean, this is a cast of lesser known actors, clearly on a budget here of anywhere from 21 to 25 million, as we've seen on a few different reports. You could see that we had some lesser known actors. Could this have helped out the realism aspect? Absolutely, there's positives to it. But at the same time, we were clinging to Ben. We wanted to stay with him. We wanted him to win, and the supporting cast, they were okay. They really didn't have much to work with.
They were just servicing his character really throughout the whole thing.
They were servicing his arc, and that's fine. We don't have to have a star-studded cast every night out.
What about his relationship with that young basketball player, the best player in the team,
Brandon?
Yeah, Brandon. I thought that was going somewhere, and once again, it sort of fell flat. Like they ended his arc with him looking at his family, and obviously, I guess they were trying to portray the family. His dad was now
his dad was supporting
board.
him, which was massive, and we could clearly see from these earlier scenes that Brandon knew he was talented, knew he had it within him, but he didn't want to realize that. He didn't want to love the game because his dad wasn't a part of it, and these are things that were understated, and that was handled quite well. And the scene with Jack Cunningham visiting Brandon's father at work, who we learnt a bit about the father. The father loved basketball, had relied on it, didn't pan out for him, and now he doesn't want Brandon to walk that same path. That's something else fantastic that touches on these themes of fatherhood. Why couldn't we go into that more?
Yeah, they did really want to focus on him drinking, and I think that was the biggest.
A lot of drinking.
That was the biggest takeaway.
Could this be a drinking game? Should we drink with him? That might not be nice to say.
No. They really narrowed down on him drinking and him trying to get out of that hole of alcoholism. Maybe a little bit too much. Maybe it was a little bit on the nose in the end. I don't know.
It was. I feel like early on, it certainly felt a bit heavy-handed. It felt like he's drinking and there was no consequences, and eventually we did see consequences play out. We did see him drunkenly stumble into the wrong home and crash his car, and eventually he was fired from being the head coach of the basketball team. So there were prices there to be paid, which is smart. It also leaves us feeling a little bit empty by the end.
It's gone for a more realistic feel where the main character didn't get his own way and he did have to suffer those consequences of what he's done. But ultimately, with a film, it does leave the audience feeling a bit flat, unfortunately. When you sometimes portray things too realistically, it can become, that's just how it is, but that's how life is. So it's an interesting thing to dive into. But
on the one hand, it's an interesting take, as you mentioned, that we're looking at things from a realistic perspective. And if this were to play out, this guy's a bit of a has-been, and he's making terrible decisions. So maybe he shouldn't win. But on the other hand, we've spent so much time, and it's Ben Affleck in the leading role. We really want him to win, and the movie didn't quite get that happy medium.
Did you feel sorry for him? Were you on his side? Where did you see yourself? Did you see yourself feeling for Ben throughout the film?
I did see myself feeling for Ben, and I think as young men, we see parts of ourselves in Ben and how he wants to help and how his life hasn't quite panned out. He has this moving dialogue to Brandon when he's driving in the car, telling Brandon after one of the games that he was in a similar situation and what happened to him and why. And Brandon asks him about why he didn't go to this university college degree.
Because of his dad.
He opens up about his father. Love it. Give me more of that. And Ben Affleck is very likable in this film. He's clearly touching on some personal demons that we will cover at some stage here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess I
wanted to see more of the father figure stuff.
It wasn't quite there. Yeah.
He was great at that. I thought that was where he really shined. When he was talking to Brandon or giving the team advice.
And less so drinking beers in the first 15 minutes of the movie.
Yeah. There was a lot of montages of him being carried back home, but I guess they were trying to nail the point that it's not good, is it?
He was not in a good place.
How did you think Ben tackled the whole film, acting-wise? Obviously, he's gone through a lot of this himself, hasn't he? He's battled with depression, he's battled with alcohol abuse, divorce. These are all real themes that he's dealt with, and I guess for me it did translate well. But thinking back, maybe it felt more real because I knew he'd gone through this rather than him being this outstanding actor. He did put on a good performance overall.
Yes.
I don't know. He's always, we were talking about this before, he's not really a heroic actor. He's not really always the heroic main lead of a film. He's always a bit of a mess. He's always got, some baggage that he has in all these characters.
That's the word.
Yeah. Even with his recent stuff, going back to his older stuff, he's always played that sort of character. So it fits him and he nails the role. I think I wouldn't say he carried the film, but the reason I found it so enjoyable was because of him. But like I said before, is because I knew that he'd gone through this stuff and I wanted to see him express his real emotions throughout this art form of this film.
I think an interesting take on that question is to consider that, yeah, it is. That's why it does work, and that's okay, because this is art after all, and it is subjective. So if we look at it and go, yeah, this movie works because Ben Affleck's performance is coming from such a personal place, and it is his to carry. He's the leading man. He's in just about every shot. Then I suppose it's fine. It's fine.
What did you think of some other elements of the film? The directing, cinematography, score. Were they standouts? Were they letdowns?
The cinematography, I felt like the basketball sequences were shot really well. Mm-hmm. I believe some of the handheld zoom-ins were a little bit clunky.
There was some weird zoom-ins.
Yeah,
did you see that?
It felt like something from the early 2000s, like we're really experimenting with some handheld stuff. But here in 2020, it's a little bit cliche. It's a little bit done. Like, we'll get these really quick zoom-ins on these really dramatic moments, but come on, as audiences,
and even
our
some
brains
slow
are trained to look at
zoom-ins,
this.
some slow random zoom-ins. Like when he was at the table with his wife, and she'd left, and it was this really awkward zoom-in. I don't know if it was an artistic choice or they wanted that awkwardness, where the wife's walked off. They were supposed to have lunch, and they wanted you to feel that. Maybe that was the indication, but
some of those shots were peppered in, but then on some other sequences we didn't see them at all, and we did get some wide shots. And if he is going to be this lonely man, they could have stuck to that more. The cinematography for me felt like a bit all over the place, and the score didn't quite come together either. The score was very much
I didn't mind the score. I thought at times it hit.
Didn't mind it.
At times it hit. It was a little bit absent in other times. But I thought there was some emotional moments there where he was getting emotional himself, and the score was backing that up to a level where I was quite engaged, and I wasn't tearing up or anything, but I was engaged, like I said, and interested to see what was going to happen. And yeah, I have to disagree with you there. I thought the score was handled pretty well. Nothing to write home about.
It wasn't an amazing score.
No, not at all.
We didn't need this.
But I think it's
John Williams. Amazing
no, we
affair.
didn't need it. That's the thing. Yeah.
You're Marcus, right?
That's right.
How many threes did Marcus make last year?
A percentage of 26.
You want to know why they're leaving you open? It's because they don't think you could hit the ocean from the beach.
Yo, he just spit facts at your ass, bruh.
All right, Jackson. Let's move on to some of the behind the scenes that you've got for us and dive into that.
Let's do it, Dan. Directing this film is no stranger to working with Ben Affleck and no stranger to sports movies, Gavin O'Connor.
Mm-hmm.
So he's done hockey in Miracle 2004 with Kurt Russell about the Americans winning 1-up on the Russians in a miracle win. And he also directed back in 2011, you might remember this one, Warrior, about mixed martial arts with Tom Hardy and Joel
One of my
Edgerton.
favourite films. And I always talk about Joel and Tom at a really high regard. I think they're both incredible actors, and that was where Gavin was put on the map for me. I thought that was really well done.
Yeah, Gavin O'Connor's got some interesting films in his filmography as well. So, like I mentioned, he's no stranger to working to Ben Affleck. I've got here, in 2015... they released The Accountant, which was a fairly modest hit.
He did The Accountant?
He did The
Wow,
Accountant. So
right.
that was on a $44 million budget, and that took in $155 million. There's been talks of a sequel, and particularly in 2015, that was an interesting year for Ben. That probably is the better of the two when compared to Batman vs. Superman. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Never heard of it.
What did you think of The Accountant when that released?
The Accountant. That was a bit of a sleeper hit for a lot of people. I wasn't a massive fan of it, to be fair. I thought it was a decent action film, but it didn't have a lot of substance for me. What did you think?
I can't say much. I didn't see it, but
Okay.
I am intrigued after seeing this pairing here in the way back to go back and review it.
The thing is, with your 2000 watch list,
Probably shouldn't have another one.
I don't think that's at the top of the list, Jackson. I've seen it, and you've got a lot more to watch before you watch The Accountant.
Too right. It's interesting how Gavin O'Connor came onto this project as well. He was originally attached to direct the upcoming Suicide Squad film.
Really? Right.
Yeah, that's the one that James Gunn's currently helming, written and directed, which is due to release in 2021. So Gavin O'Connor had joined that project after a few other people had left, brought in his own writer, someone he teamed up with for Warrior.
And he dropped out.
And sure enough, in 2017, he left after he was frustrated with what Warner Brothers wanted. So sure enough, he released this with Warner Brothers after teaming up with
That would have
them
been
for
a
The
different
Accountant.
direction, him going from these other films, action, sports, underdog films, to a superhero,
A superhero team up.
Yeah.
And a big team up, particularly after the earlier Suicide Squad film, which I'm sure we'll cover at some stage here.
So was this his latest film, bearing in mind from The Accountant?
Yeah, it was. He's had an interesting filmography. In 2016, he released Jane Got a Gun, which starred Natalie Portman and Joel Edgerton. That was a pretty notorious bomb. He was part of that, which saw a lot of different stars and a lot of different directors and even a lot of different writers come off and on during production.
And that was Christian Bale as well, I think. He was in that.
Yeah. I believe he was attached at one point during production, and so was Bradley Cooper, but both of them ended up bowing out of production. So
there was one other big named actor, Joel, and who else was it? That's right, Ewan McGregor.
Ewan McGregor, yes.
Yeah. So that was a big bomb. I didn't know that. I don't think I've seen it.
No, I don't think anyone else did.
No, I've seen trailers, and that was enough for me to, give it a miss. But yeah, so what else have you got for us, Jackson?
We've touched on part of the screenplay here and our thoughts on it, and this one was written by Brad Inglesby, who also penned, you might remember this one, Out of the Furnace, with Christian Bale from back in 2013. An action thriller, as well as 2015's Run All Night with Liam Neeson.
Okay, some interesting films. Not outstanding, but decent enough screenplays.
No, I mean, hey, fantastic. This screenwriter's now sold 3 screenplays. I'm sure he's doing fantastic, but it looks like that he could have a third bomb on his hand here. It's interesting when we go back to Run All Night. That was also distributed by Warner Brothers. And of course, Out of the Furnace starred Casey Affleck.
So you honestly think that The Way Back is going to bomb at the box office? You don't think... Because it's on a short budget. You said, what was it on, 10, 15 million?
It's reported from about 21 to 25 million.
And you don't think it's going to do anywhere near that, or maybe break even? What?
I don't believe so. I haven't seen too much marketing for this film.
There hasn't been marketing, you're right.
It's open in the US alongside Disney Pixar's Onward. And
yeah,
judging from the marketing materials, what's really appealing about this?
True. I feel like we're not seeing the marketing here in Australia. I think they're probably going a little bit harder in the US, and I think they know that's their demographic. And with Ben Affleck as a lead, you'd think it'd open decent enough, even if it isn't a superhero film or a big action film or a thriller, whatever, just with his name attached, you think it could get some traction in the US with his history. So I disagree. I think it could do all right. Maybe in the 50 million, it might end up 50, 75 million mark, just from the fact that he's in it. He's battled with these real life, situations. And I think they're probably marketing it more as a underdog basketball story. And in the US, what's one of their favorite sports?
One of the biggest sports globally.
Correct. So if they go that route and, market in the NBA and all that, that could do well for them. So
I hope.
Yeah.
I eat my
we
words.
Don't know.
Fully
we don't
involved.
know.
Making movies is really super hard. So I hope everyone makes a ton of cash.
Yeah. So while we're on the box office, what's the early critical reception, Jackson? What are we seeing?
So far, we're certainly seeing a positive reaction. A bit mixed, but positive. It's still early days. IMDb has this at a 7.4 out of 10 for user ratings, which is quite good. Rotten Tomatoes has this at 88% of critics mentioning that they've liked it, and Metacritic has it sitting at a 68. So while I'm not too positive on how well this is going to be received by audiences, critics are certainly enjoying it, and much of the praise is going to Ben Affleck, which is deservedly so. The man was leaving rehab for some of these shots, and he even had a sober coach there with him for the shoot. So
For this shoot?
Yeah,
Really?
absolutely.
Because I guess he was battling, it brings back old demons, looking at this screenplay and acting it out, wouldn't it? It would be probably not a traumatic experience, but it'd be a very difficult experience as an actor, I would have thought.
I really hope it's a transformative experience.
Yeah. Something where he can, and I've seen some interviews of him now, and he seems like a changed man. I mean, we'll never know, but the way he's portraying himself, he seems more happy. He's on the right track now. He even opened up. He said he had help from Robert Downey Jr. and
That's great.
Bradley Cooper, and some other people that have battled with similar issues helped him out a lot with getting through it. So that's interesting. Jackson, before we go any further, I'd like to talk a little bit about Displate, our sponsor for today. They create thick metal plates, quality prints. I've got 3 here on my wall, 3 gaming ones. I need some movie ones, Jackson. What movie ones should we get for the office here?
Well, let's recommend some Ben Affleck films. What about Argo?
Argo, yeah. Batman vs Superman.
Maybe not so much.
Might make a good poster.
What about Good Will Hunting?
Good Will Hunting, yeah.
What about Live by Night?
Yeah, oh yeah, that's an interesting one.
Certainly is.
I'm going to have to get more of these displays in the office, Jackson. They're just fantastic. I've got the smaller ones, but you can get larger ones. They really fill up the room.
You know what we need to get?
Yeah?
The Town.
The Town, one of the classic films.
That's a Boston classic right there.
That is a Boston classic. But of course, we thank Displate for sponsoring the video. And of course, you guys can use the code WeWatchThis15 to get 15% off. Support them, guys. They support us, so please support them. They're some of the best posters. They're easy to set up, and it works for any environment, whether it's a theater room, an office, just a normal bedroom. So go out, use the code WeWatchThis15.
I spent a lot of time hurting myself. I made a lot of bad decisions. I had a lot of regrets.
Jackson, moving back to the way back, what was your favorite scene?
Earlier I mentioned the monologue while Jack Cunningham was driving Brandon home.
Mm-hmm.
And that one is really sticking with me. I also loved the moment when they'd won that qualifying game to get into the playoffs. They beat, was it the Memorial High School? They beat the number 1 team in the league. Both Jack Cunningham and Brandon had this awesome embrace, and that was the big emotional high, the big emotional peak for the movie. And I'd go back and I'd watch that 5-10 minutes prior again.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that.
Stands out as a highlight.
It is definitely a highlight. I love that scene as well, where he's got this relief on his face, and it's a slow-mo across that scene.
Yes.
And they zoom out.
You can see him in the wide shot, and he's still sitting there.
It's brilliant how they show him in the wide shot like that. I wonder if they filmed that with multiple cameras, or maybe, I don't know how they did it, but
He must have had a very sore neck.
I feel like in a scene like that, as a director, you just have to say, this is the high moment, everyone go crazy. Ben, you do you, but everyone else, lift. It'd be interesting to be behind the scenes for a scene like that, because you can't direct every single person. So it's sort of like, everyone, energy up for this scene. We're going again. Do you know what I mean?
Just pray it pans out, and if not, fix it in post.
Yeah, no, that was definitely a highlight for me. I'll go a different direction. Obviously, I like the scene where he sees the couple and what's happened there with their son. But I like the scene where Ben loses his job. Jack loses his job, as the coach. I think that's
Powerful.
It's really shows that he really loved doing it. It was something he was passionate about, and the desperation where he's like, please don't do this, and then it just goes on and it elevates. And they've got this strict policy, no alcohol. We've told you.
He had to face responsibility,
and he had to face responsibility. And a lot of times in films, they'll get around that where the character can come back.
It's a movie. There aren't these grave consequences.
Correct, but in this they stick to it, and I got to give them props for that. They stick to their guns, and he doesn't come back. And of course,
there is no way back.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? I think, I think that was my favorite scene because it just, they stuck to their guns, and the acting was great, and it was sort of a climax. Like we said, it did end up falling flat because of they stuck to that, but I just thought that was an interesting scene. All right, Jackson, replacing Ben Affleck. Can it be done? I know this is our segment where we try to replace the lead actors, actresses in the film that we're reviewing. And obviously today, I think we can only really showcase one actor. It's Ben Affleck. Who would you, if we had to, replace Ben with? What other actor do you think could fill this role?
It's a real tough take. We think other actors who might have recently battled some demons, or even people from history. It's also a basketball movie. We need someone tall. We need someone with presence. We need someone who looks like they could be athletic. And Ben Affleck ticks a lot of boxes there.
True.
I'm thinking actors who have troubled histories. I'm thinking of Tom Hardy. Someone with a lot of range. I like the idea of a Shia LaBeouf in this film. Someone else who has some demons.
Yeah.
Could either of them play basketball at an elite level in the US? Or at
Is
least
it believable?
Look the part? Probably
That's the
not.
thing. Is it believable?
Not really. It's also a movie.
But is it believable that Ben... I didn't really buy that he was this elite basketball player.
We didn't see him bouncing a ball until the last 2 minutes of the film. How perfect was that?
That was on purpose because they knew he couldn't really play.
Maybe Adam Sandler. He plays a lot of basketball.
He does, doesn't he? Yeah, he always plays. I think Bradley Cooper.
Oh, I love it.
I think he's got the range. We've seen him in a Star Is Born. I think it was a similar performance in a way, battling with demons, battling with inner demons. So I think he could definitely. I think he's definitely my choice. There's not many though that could pull this off.
It's a deeply personal film.
It's a deeply personal film, and I think it was. I feel like it was centered around Ben, the way it was written. I don't know. I don't know the history, whether this screenplay was written before, after.
It was written before.
Okay. Well, it felt like it was
for him.
Yeah, it felt like it was for him, really. So that would be who I would choose. Jackson, overall thoughts, final ratings for The Way Back.
5 out of 10. Beer cans in the shower.
5 out of 10. That's low.
I wanted to go higher, but for me, there was another film going on that I really wanted to watch, and it just didn't play out.
That's a good way to put it to summarize what you're saying. For me, I will give this film a 7 out of 10.
That's high.
Like I said at the top of the show, I enjoyed it for what it was. I didn't think it hit on a lot of the tropes that these underdog stories usually hit on. Like I said, it stuck to its guns. The acting from everyone I thought was pretty spot on. Even the basketballers, I thought those kids did a pretty good job.
Yeah.
They're not big actors. This is probably their first gig, and
they worked.
And the side characters, even though they didn't have much to work with, they did all right. It was Ben's film, and I think he nailed his performance. So 7 from me. Would I recommend you go out to see this film in the theaters? Yes and no. I know you wouldn't obviously recommend people go, would you?
I think I do, despite not giving this a high rating.
Yeah.
If part of Ben's story and part of his rehabilitation and part of him coming to grips with some bad decisions he's made and this protagonist speaks to you on a personal level, and it certainly spoke to me, I do recommend it. Just don't expect Hamlet.
For me, if you're a fan of Ben Affleck, I think go out and see it. If you're a fan of underdog stories and sports stories, just be hesitant that it's not all about that. It's more about, like we said before, the alcohol, the demons, and it goes into that more than it does the underdog story. So
It's about baggage.
it's about baggage. So if you find that interesting, then this would be a film to go out and see. So 7 out of 10 from me and 5 out of 10 from Jackson. All right, Jackson, before we end today, let's just talk a little bit about what else we've watched this week. What did you get around to watching? Anything?
This week, I watched Honey Boy.
Honey Boy. Wow, Shia LaBeouf. I really want to see that. What were your thoughts?
Absolutely, go out and see it. If you've
Yeah?
got any interest, I recommend it. For me, 8 out of 10.
Yeah.
Very similar to The Way Back. A lot of parallels going on here with someone who's an alcoholic. They've got their own baggage, their own problems, their own demons to deal with. And it's Shia LaBeouf's movie. He wrote the script. He has top billing in it, despite not playing himself. I really recommend it. I don't want to go into it too much,
Yeah, you just say go out and see it.
but there's some great performances. There's a child actor, Noah Jupe, who plays a version of Shia LaBeouf, opposite Shia LaBeouf, as playing this boy's father, and he was fantastic. I couldn't say I've seen him in
Essentially, for
anything
people
else.
that don't know, this is Shia LaBeouf wrote this film, correct?
He wrote this film while he was in rehab as a form of therapy.
And it's about his experience with his father and growing up, correct?
Yeah, and him coming to terms with trauma and him coming to terms with a sense of understanding. Very similar to some other films we saw in 2019 with daddy issues, like A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood and Joker. There's some understanding that needs to happen here, and in order to forgive someone else, you might also have to look within yourself. Highly recommend it. There's some great performances as well, and FKA Twigs,
And
the
what's
singer,
it like?
turns in an interesting role.
What's it like with Shia LaBeouf not playing himself and playing his dad? Is it jarring? Is it interesting? How does it play on screen?
He's one of those interesting actors when you look at him, and we've seen him in so many leading roles with things like Transformers and Indiana Jones, that he's such a recognizable face, and in this he's totally unrecognizable. You've got to go see it. At first it might seem a little jarring, but across the 90-minute runtime, it's a very brisk film. It's great.
I like that.
You have to see it. 8 out of 10.
I like that it's not a long-winded 90 minutes. You don't see a lot of 90 minutes these days.
Not at all.
And that segues to the film that I watched this week, Jackson, The Witch, which is also around that 90-minute mark.
What did you think?
Now, that's a horror film, Jackson. You need to see this film. It is disturbing, haunting. It is a horror film like no other. It is.
Wow.
It is one of the best horrors I've seen in the last decade. It's Robert Eggers, who we know did The Lighthouse recently.
Yeah, this is a really interesting take from you. You were quiet. You saw some backlash on some of your social media when you mentioned
definitely.
that you weren't a fan of The Lighthouse.
Look, I don't conform to the film society. If I don't like a film, I'll say it. If I love a film, I'll say it. The Lighthouse, I didn't enjoy it as a film, as a package. I enjoyed elements, but as a full package, didn't enjoy it. I think I gave it a 5, and I definitely got backlash for that because it's a very well respected and enjoyed, loved film across the board.
Yeah, not without those like yourself who are a little divisive on it.
Correct. And I can appreciate everything about that film, from sound, cinematography to Robert Pattinson and William Dafoe's performances. But just for me, it didn't hit. We can talk about that another time. But his film here, The Witch, man, it hits. Acting phenomenal. Just the way the story's told, it's so uneasy. That you just feel so uneasy throughout the 97-minute runtime, I think it is. you don't know what's going to happen. Things unfold. It's shocking. It's disturbing. Like I said, it ends in a way in which, wow, it's. I just recommend you go out and see it if you're a horror fan. A lot of people aren't. A lot of people I know don't watch horrors. They stay away, and this wouldn't be the first one I showed them because they'll probably stay away for good. Because it is quirky. It isn't. It's old town folk speaking. It's not normal dialogue. It's it's sort of like Lighthouse, where you've got to really listen in to hear what they're saying. Because it's set back in the 1700 or whatever it was, and it's essentially this family outcasted from a village, and now there's a witch sort of that takes a baby, and then it just goes on and on. But it
sounds right up my alley.
It's very disturbing, and it's one you won't forget, Jackson. I really recommend you go out and see it this week.
What was your rating?
Final rating 8 out of 10 as well. Same as Honey Boy.
I love it. I'm gonna have to watch it.
Beautiful, Jackson. Well, we thank you guys for watching our first episode of the We Watch This Movie podcast. Next week, Jackson, what are we taking a look at?
Next week, we're looking at the new Vin Diesel comic book vehicle, Bloodshot.
We could be in for a...
Strap in.
We could be in for a interesting film here. I'm not expecting great things, to be honest, but... when has Vin Diesel really done a 10 out of 10 film? It hasn't been recently.
Have you not watched Fast and the Furious?
What's that?
Films 1 through 9. Triple X, Return of Xander Cage. None of these ringing bells. Come on.
No, they're not. Hopefully it's decent, but I'm not optimistic. Anyway, thanks for tuning in today, guys. Of course, leave us a 5-star rating. Follow us on all social media platforms. We Watch This: Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd.
At We Watch This. Dan, where can everyone find you?
They can find me at Dan Allen Movies on Instagram, Letterboxd. And if you're into a bit of the gaming, find me at Dan Allen Gaming on all social media platforms. And you can find Jackson on...
You'll find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and most of all, Letterboxd at Marshall on Film, followed by an _.
And this guy can review films. I'm loving what you're doing, Jackson, with your take on films and your interesting rating system. I know a lot of people are enjoying it too, so definitely follow Jackson. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next week for Bloodshot.
Thanks for listening.